And I just hand over the floor to Sunil Fernandes to take over from here and give us his point of view on the issue that we are discussing today. Welcome, Sunil. Take over.
Yeah, now the FCRA Act is a law. The new amendments are actually meant to control much more. The FCRA Act controls a lot of things without clarity in the law itself in many aspects. Now, as a chartered accountant, my first advice to clients is always understand the law. Do not approach the law from a point of fear, because laws are actually meant to protect your interests. And therefore, whenever there is a law, be careful to adhere and follow all the rules prescribed under the law and the procedures prescribed under the law. And more so under the FCRA Act, because even in Income Tax Act, GST Act, sometimes even if you mess up on the procedures, yet the tribunals and courts have overruled the procedural aspect and confirmed the statements as it is. Right. But the FCRA Act, especially these amendments, are very heavy on simple procedural aspects, which can cause, if you do not follow them, can cause huge losses to you if this law is passed. Now, even formally before this act was actually passed, the FCRA was very, to that extent, a bit arbitrary in the way they dealt with cases. So sometimes they will give an objection for your cancellation without explaining what really does a clause mean. For example, 2-3 years ago, a client of mine was doing an excellent job educating slum children, applied for FCRA, and they rejected it purely on the grounds of violation of Section 12. Section 12(4), I think they mentioned it. Now, Section 12(4) has got many clauses. Which of them have you violated? That was not mentioned. So when I asked this client, go to and appeal in the court, or at least file for a review, he was too frightened because it's FCRA Act, the Home Ministry is law and order, so let's not push it. Okay. So one thing is, please understand that the law is generally very clear. So you need to follow the technicalities of the law. Okay. Now, why more so? Because under FCRA, if you see the amendments done, which can cause you great harm, formally there was Section 15 of the FCRA Act, which said that the property vested in a designated officer, and normally the designated officer would only seize your bank account and the money of your FCRA funds, not your properties. And even then you could apply and you could utilize some of it. Or you could continue your project based on the permission of the designated authority, which later became, the vesting person became the secretary of the concerned state of the Home Ministry. Okay, now they've clarified much more in depth who the vesting authority is. They've clarified much more in depth the trustees and persons responsible for making the mess. Earlier it was the chief functionary. Now it is literally everybody in the board of directors, all the governing body members, all the trustees, and also goes to include certain responsible people who handle the projects of the client. For example, if you're a finance manager, you're handling the finance. If you're a project, you've got particular projects in hand, then you also would be a responsible person. And therefore, being a responsible person, you will be let off the hook if you can prove that you did everything diligently. Now, if you've got a body of members, 7, 8, 9 people, it is very difficult to prove that only you went and did something that was technically, absolutely right. Okay. So there has to be better coordination and understanding with the members. And very important, I would suggest even at your meetings, minute things that are happening. Yeah, because minutes, which most NGOs fail to maintain, are very critical in actually understanding how you're functioning and actually getting you off the hook on many of the decisions that you've taken, if the decisions are taken in good faith, with proper discussion, and not arbitrarily. Okay. And also brings in the bigger gamut that it has been discussed with the trustees. Okay. And minutes of the meeting should essentially not be bullet points. Many organizations just put bullet points to start something, to this. Okay. Now, bullet points mean nothing. Every bullet point can end with either yes, no, maybe, or whatever. Okay. But it is good to explain also the discussion behind each of the objectives and why you're doing what you're doing. Okay. So that brings sort of clarity, because when you go and file a challenge, these things matter a lot. Okay. Besides that, what is very important is to understand the technicalities of the law. Now, under the new amendments which they propose, if you have FCRA has been cancelled, then all your FCRA assets automatically vest with the designated authority. Automatically. Okay, there's no need of anything else that you need to do. They will ask you for more your documents. You've got to supply all your books of accounts, documents, everything to them. Yeah. So be very careful that it is not cancelled. Now, the reasons for cancellation is one, if you do not apply for registration within the due date, they can cancel it. Or if some of the documents that you can upload are not clear, that's one more reason why they cancel it. Third is if the trustees are not there at the addresses which you have given uploaded, that's another reason why they would cancel it, because they say it's possibly a Benami address. So it is better to be very clear. If it's got an Indian address and is right now residing abroad, give both the addresses, both the details, so that when they clarify, they know exactly where the person is. Okay, because nowadays they take trouble to clarify and call each of the trustees. Okay, finally, make sure that you file all your returns within the due date. And at present, please don't make any mistakes in your returns, because in most of the other acts, there is always a revision return that you can file. In FCRA, there isn't. So be very careful that the details are very clear. So mainly these are the aspects. Let me just read out some of the other things where they can cancel. Okay, now the certificate shall be deemed to have ceased on the expiry of the period of validity if application for renewal has not been made, application for renewal has been made, but refused by the central government under the second proviso to subsection 16, or the certificate is not renewed before its expiry. No person whose certificate has ceased shall receive or utilize a foreign contribution unless it is renewed. The other one is section 14. Section 14 gives a whole lot of reasons why your certificate can be cancelled. Okay, one of them is also if there is any sort of proceeding against you where you have been not convicted, but essentially where there is any sort of complaint against you for anything. So conviction is secondary. Okay? So now, therefore, we need to be very careful. Also for Christian organizations and for those who are quite zealous about religion, one of the reasons for cancellation can also be if you proselytize, if you convert, those sort of things. So when you even want to convert somebody, it is very good that you make proper documentation to ensure that the person is not convicted by or converted for any reason. The onus should be purely on the person who wants to get either baptized or join your church. Okay, so normally I would help my clients with drafting a proper affidavit where the person who's getting converted takes entire onus on himself, that he is offering himself for all of this. He has come there and he has even the visitor's card which some of our churches give. Be careful to put disclaimers over there that this person's come up with his own will, not been asked to come in there, and so on and so forth. Sometimes also ask people, why don't you record your messages? Because there have been cases when people listen to a sermon, then they go out and they study in the sermon, you're trying to coerce us and try to convert us, and you've spoken something against a religion. So a simple mobile phone you can keep recorded, so when it goes there, you've got your message. Okay. Besides that, accounts. Now, under the new amendments, okay, now these new amendments have already set the groundwork over the last 2 years where you're supposed to declare all your foreign assets and their location also. So therefore, the government can easily pinpoint based on your own statements where the assets are, number one. Besides, now with the SBI being the sole bank account where the money comes in, it is much easier for them to also seize your funds. Unlike earlier when you had multiple bank accounts and that go through a procedure to sometimes stop your funds. Okay, so that's one more thing you have to be careful of. There are some other things. Okay, now for example, even overheads. Okay, now I'm talking about not with the retrospective effect, what you already need to take care of, so that to prevent yourself from getting within the clutches of these new cancellation, not agreeing to renew or whatever. Okay, there are two things which are found in the FC4 return. One is that under section 2B12, it talks about other income. Now, normally people are under the impression that only the interest received on FTs would form other income from the FCRA assets. There could also be many other things. For example, direct rent received from the FCRA asset. That could form other income. But even otherwise, it is good that you get a good chartered accountant who will clearly make an Excel sheet or record. If, let's assume that asset is built on land which you purchase out of local funds, and only the building is of your FCRA funds, then there has to be technically based on accounting standards, a bifurcation based on the values of both. Okay, so in case you're required to challenge the designated authorities finding or the FCRA departments finding that you deserve a cancellation, that these sort of records will help you later on to come out because you've clearly thought through them. Okay. Now, incomes for an NGO can be from multiple sources. You could be having seminars and the money comes from there. Now, just because you hold a seminar in a FCRA purchase building does not make that an income from your FCRA asset. It is essentially an income from your activity. Okay. So be very careful to carefully record, especially with FCRA funds, exactly where it is and how it is coming from. The other one is about overheads. You're not supposed to spend more than 20% overheads from 2020. In case you're not spend 20%, you can still carry it forward. But again, the definition of that overheads is not very clear, leaves a little bit of doubt. Now, if you talk about normal accounting standards or how you maintain accounts, you have to apportion your expenses between the time spent on a particular project or otherwise. But as here the rule says, clearly anybody belonging to the governing body, his travel expenses, salaries, and everything else would be part of the overheads. Now, what if your NGO essentially is participatory and has somebody, an absolute field level worker who's also part of the governing body, purely in a representative category? How would you decide whether it's an overhead or whether it's a project expenditure? So there again, I get my clients to clearly put their contract in writing, that job profile, and then clearly minute that as a part of the representation for the wider variety of group of people, which is part of the governing body. So tomorrow, in case it is challenged, we have got reasonable grounds based on the standard practices under law, okay, to say that this is really not part of the overhead. Down below, the last section says, but however, salaries paid to doctors, nurses, and other people who are involved in grassroots level, etc. Now, etc. word is generally not very good in law because it doesn't allow you to settle on a clear definition of what should be and what should not be. Okay, so maintaining records for this is very important. Let somebody very carefully. Okay, now sometimes we spend money both from local and FCRA. Now, if it is spent on one invoice, please don't still mix up your funds. Make sure that there's one covering invoice and there are two separate invoices for what you spent from FCRA and what you spent from local funds, so that they're both recorded in absolutely separate books of accounts. Okay, all this will go a long way in mitigating at a later stage any sort of doubts, clarifications on your cancellations. Other thing is, maintain your, okay, there are even some doubts on the current law on how you maintain utilization accounts. Now, you can always receive money in one designated account. Now, what money should be received in designated account? Because you can't transfer funds actually directly to an FCRA account. Now, this is where a lot of organizations are finding a problem, because some of the incomes, now regarding TDS, which is proportionate to your FCRA funds, a circular has come out in 2024, which says that the TDS that you receive, the proportion of the FCRA can be put back in the designated account. Now, sale of assets, which is from FCRA funds, ought to be put back in the designated account. But State Bank of India, surprisingly, even, but I don't know whether it's all clients, but it does not always permit it. I had a client very recently, just a few months back, who sold a property, a few crores of rupees, and SFA refused to take it, though we gave a certificate that this is part of the FCRA. So I said, good, we have got enough documentation to prove that the bank is defaulting, so put it in utilization accounts. Utilization account accepted it, so we've at least got some documentation. If they challenge it, we can show that we have tried to do our best. Okay. Now, besides that, what about other incomes like rental incomes that you may be receiving directly from FCRA properties? The chances that SBI is going to take it is almost nil. Okay, so that is where you need to use some good advice and see how you can record it and push your case so that tomorrow, if that is a reason for cancellation, you can either hold the FCRA department at fault or the banks at fault. So these are mainly things that you need to do, because right now, this FCRA Act, which is supposed to actually protect the sovereignty and integrity of the nation, is cancelling and causing NGOs to lose their properties based purely on procedural aspects and not on anything to do with things that are against the national interest. Okay, so that is where I would suggest you be very careful in the way you maintain your technical records and the documentation is required. Yeah, so I'll wind up here and we open.